We're talking today with Craig Brodie of Hudsonville, Michigan, and the interviewer is James Smither of the Grand Valley State University Veterans History Project. Okay, Craig, can you start us off with some background on yourself, and to begin with, where and when were you born?
I was born in 1941, August, in Plattsburgh, New York.
All right. Now, did you grow up there, or did you move around?
No, my father was an insurance adjuster for General Motors, and he was assigned there, and from there he went into the Army for World War II.
Okay. And did you stay in Plattsburgh or go someplace else?
No, we went home to my mother's home in Newtown, Connecticut, which may be familiar to you because of recent happenings
Right.
there.
Okay. And now, did you stay there after the war, or did you go on somewhere else? Or?
No, I stayed there, went to college at the University of Vermont, was land grant school.
Right.
So I had to take ROTC, and I did. And then I stayed on for senior ROTC because I had a need for some money, and they did pay you. Graduated on June the 9th of 1963. Same day I graduated, I was commissioned in the United States Army.
Okay. So at that point, the expectation was if you complete the full ROTC program, you're going into the service then?
If they selected you to be able to do that.
Okay.
And I was commissioned in the armor, but as a ordnance officer for career.
Okay.
So I had 2 years in armor, detailed, and then I would be an ordnance officer.
Okay. Talk a little bit about the ROTC training itself. What did they actually have you do in there?
Well, the first 2 years was mostly marching and a little classwork. The second 2 years, you had to do the marching, you had to lead it. You led a squad, or you led a platoon, or you led the Corps. I was the executive officer to the Corps in my senior year, and a cadet rank of lieutenant colonel.
Okay. Now, for this, they didn't have you do summer exercises or things like that?
Yes, you had one summer camp between your junior and senior year. I did that at Fort Devens.
Okay. That's in Massachusetts?
That's in Massachusetts.
Okay. And what did you do during that time?
We played soldier, and they were as hard on us, I'm sure, as they are in drill camp on new soldiers.
Okay. So at the point then you talked about, you did an extra year of ROTC, or you just did was the last year optional, or?
Well, between your junior and senior year, you went to the camp.
Right.
And then you completed your senior year.
Mm-hmm.
So I had 4 years of ROTC.
Right.
2 mandatory, 2 voluntary.
Okay. And so the 2 mandatory years would not commit you to being in the service, is that right?
Well, you had to do the last 2 years to get in, to get a commission.
Right. But if you said you're going to the land grant school, there was the expectation that everybody be in ROTC for 2 years.
For 2 years, that's correct.
Right. Okay. But people who completed that and then stopped?
They were fine.
Yeah. So they normally would not go into the service at that point.
Yeah, the percentage of officers moving forward, or cadets moving forward to the next 2 years, was smaller, much smaller than the size of the Corps.
Okay. All right. Now, at the point then when you finish that, and so you graduate, you get your commission, now do you have to then go to an officer's training course run by the Army at that point?
Mine was armor at this point.
Okay.
So I went down to New Jersey, where my brother, who was a warrant officer in the Army at that time, lived, and he got me my first uniforms. And then he stuck me on an airplane, and off I went to Fort Knox, Kentucky, Armored Officer Basic School.
Okay. Describe that for me.
That was a real experience, because you're not used to being around a tank until you get around a tank. And they taught us the 2 emphases. One was what a tank does, how you can fight a tank and use a tank. And the other emphasis was on physical conditioning. We ran in combat boots every morning, maybe 3 miles, 4 miles, something like that. And the final exam was a running course. You had to run, you'd stop and fire a tank round or pretend you were firing a tank round. You'd go run and you'd go do a map problem. You'd go run and you'd go do a... I finished first or second.
Okay. Now, was it easy for you to kind of adjust to the discipline of military life? Or?
Yeah, I think it was. I think I was looking for some guidance, and I was getting it. But I didn't do real well as a young officer. I'll cover that a little later when I get down there.
Okay. Now, how long was the course at Fort Knox?
About 5 months, I think.
Okay.
4 or 5 months.
Now, did you have any downtime there? Or?
Hardly.
Okay.
Hardly any downtime at all. I mean, it was go, go, go. When it wasn't go, it was study.
All right. And what sort of people did you have training you at that point?
I had, most of them were officers, actually. There were some classes which were led by NCOs, but most were officers. One of my first experiences with being an officer in the Army was when I reported in. I got there a few days early, so they put me in charge of giving a lecture to the soldiers on fire prevention, which was a real shock for a young lieutenant coming in. He said, "Lieutenant, you go teach that class tomorrow." I went, whoa, 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 whoa. You go teach that class tomorrow. There's a script. You get it down, you do it. And I did. So you do what you have to do.
All right. Now, once you complete the officer training course, what do you do next?
Next, I go up to Brooklyn Navy Yard, and I get on the ship Rose, which is a troop ship bound for Germany, Bremerhaven, Germany. And I never been on a ship before, and I'm walking up the gangplank, and I see a stack of boxes in front of me that says Lieutenant Brodie on them. And I go, what the heck is going on? I've come to find out that I'm the youngest officer on the ship. I am the troop information officer, therefore. So I have to teach the soldiers about Germany, where I have never been in my life. I'm given 2 days to put the class together. I think we were 9 days sailing over. I did 2 days to put the class together and present it to a colonel. Then when I got his blessing and I was ready to go, I went down and I taught the class about 3 times a day, all the way across the ocean.
Okay, so you get individual groups of soldiers coming in, and
Yes,
that's just part of
yes,
how they
yes.
spend their time. All right. Now, how was the trip otherwise? Was it good weather, or?
We had good weather, yeah, and I was fortunate. I had an old warrant officer I was in the cabin with. I think he was a senior warrant and I was a junior officer. But he was smart enough to bring a bottle of bourbon with him. And so we were not as dry as the rest of the ship was.
Okay. Now, you get over now to Germany. Now what do they do with you?
I arrive in Bremerhaven. I got to tell you this story. I arrive in Bremerhaven, and I get off the ship. Band's playing. It's really nice. We'll go over to the train station, which is right there. I'm asked to sign for the train because I'm the train commander. I knew nothing about a train. And I had on the train many soldiers who had been in the Army for many, many years. And they got off at the stations and wandered around, and I was supposed to stop all that. Well, I tried for about the first 2 stops. And then I said, nuts. I went to my bed, went to sleep, and I got to Heidelberg fine.
Okay. And now what unit were you assigned to in Heidelberg?
I was assigned to the 4th Medium Tank Battalion, 68th Armor. I was met on the train station by Walker M. Riddle, my first commander, captain. And he said, we're going to the field. I said, when? He said, oh, about 2 hours. He said, I got to issue you some clothes and we're out of here. So I went to the field. And we were on maneuvers, and I took over command of a platoon, tank platoon.
Okay. What kind of tanks were they?
They were M60s.
Okay.
And I had a platoon sergeant, Willie Shoemaker, who had fought tanks in the Korean War. And he essentially told me, don't worry, I'll take care of things until we can figure out how this thing works.
And were you smart enough to listen?
Yes, I was. Willie Shoemaker was a great teacher. I will be in debt to him all my life.
All right. Now, what were you actually doing in the field?
We were doing a war exercise. They did them all the time at that time in Germany. And we'd go out with the tanks, maneuver across the countryside, get in position, and there were people who were umpires, like, that's not what they call them. Can't remember.
But they had that function.
But they had that function, and they decide whether the maneuver was in your favor or the enemy's favor, and you got killed, you got to put a flag up on your tank and say, it's all over for me.
Now, did they have people driving other tanks that were enemy? Or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. They might not be tanks. They might have been 113s or something like that.
But they had vehicles
They
representing
had
enemy
vehicles
tanks?
representing tanks, yeah, which would maneuver against you.
Okay. Now, is this still 1963, or are we in 64 now? Or?
I'm probably in 60, let me see, I'm in 64 now.
Okay. What time of year was it, do you think?
Well, I went to the field, that time of year,
Yeah.
it was in the cold weather.
That's what I thought, yeah, early in the year.
Yeah. But tankers do better than infantrymen when it's cold.
Well, are tanks heated or just sheltered?
They're heated.
I guess you got a big engine running, so.
Yeah, of course, they don't like you to sleep in the tank, but we do it.
Now, how long did that exercise last?
Oh, I don't remember that particular one, but they typically ran about 2 weeks or a week. Then on the base camp, you had an actual deployment position. So they'd toot the horn, say the Russians are coming. We'd go out to our pre-assigned deployment positions. And then they would also, when we did that, they would take one platoon maybe, or two platoons, and say, road march to bomb holder. I was in Mannheim. That's a long road march. And then they'd get you a bomb holder and they'd say, go out in the range and fire the guns. We were ready.
Now, was there, at that time, I mean, the Berlin Wall had gone up a couple of years earlier, there had been the Cuban Missile Crisis, Kennedy had been assassinated, and so forth.
Yeah.
So was it a fairly tense atmosphere for a while?
I don't know if I would call it tense. I would say we trained with vigor.
Okay.
But I don't know that we did anything different. We just did a little more of it.
All right. Now that you're out, and this is sort of a regular position, did you go into town in Mannheim or in the areas close to the base? I mean, did you?
Yes.
Okay. And how did the Germans at that point treat the American soldiers?
They treated us well. I mean, I was surprised at that, but they treated us very well with respect. And in fact, I later on would move in with a German landlord, where his family was downstairs and I was living upstairs. And he was very kind and good to us, and she was too.
Okay. Now, had you learned any German before you went over there?
No, I knew almost nothing. Now, I had an uncle who was a prisoner of war in World War II in a German prison camp. And he told me, he said, you should learn to speak German. But there's another thing to do, and I couldn't get there from here.
So did you pick up some German while you were there? Or?
Yeah, I mean, you pick up enough to ask for something, or, yeah.
But the family you stayed with, they could speak English, or did you just kind of,
most of the Germans who were near American bases could speak some English, like we could speak some German, but I was not proficient.
All right. Now, how long did you spend in Germany in that tour?
I stayed till 1966.
Okay, so that's about 2 years.
But I served with another unit.
Okay.
I was assigned from the 4th Medium Tank Battalion, 68th Armored, to the 3rd Squadron, 8th Cavalry. Now, the 3rd Squadron, 8th Cavalry pulled routine German border duty between East and West Germany, right up in the Fulda Gap. So I was transferred because the 4th and the 68th went home. And I went to the 3rd Squadron, 8th Cavalry. I was again a platoon leader. And I think I was assigned there about 2 weeks, and we went off to the border. And that was a good experience. Different.
Okay. Now, the Fulda Gap, that was the expected invasion route?
Yes.
Okay. So describe a little bit what was going on up there, what you did.
Well, we were out on the wire. We patrolled the wire is what we did. And there was our wire, there was no man's land, there was their wire, and then their towns and villages. And it was amazing to me, at 9 o'clock or 8 o'clock or whatever time at night, every light would go out over there. Every light. The border was also patrolled by German Forstmeisters with German shepherds. They were going up and down all the time. And they flew the border, of course, with fixed-wing aircraft. They go slow enough so they could see what was going on.
Okay. And were they Russian troops opposite you, or East Germans, or could you not tell?
I don't think I knew. I'm sure somebody knew, but I don't think I knew. I was a lieutenant.
Okay. Now, did they play any games along the border, or do things to try to see what you would do, or anything like that?
Not that I recall. They may have done that. Not that I recall. The guys would get a little wild when they come off the border and get back in the post, though. Oh, jeez. I was a duty officer one night, and I walked out into the street, and a bowling ball was rolling down the street. And I said, what the hell is going on? And Sergeant said, there's trouble up at the bowling alley. And I said, I guess there is. And we went up there with the MPs, and they'd had too much drink.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. How would you characterize the morale of the soldiers in that time in Germany?
Good. I don't think they had no sense that they weren't doing something that was honorable.
Mm-hmm. Now, the time you're there, that's also the period when Vietnam starts to heat up and we begin to actually deploy Army ground troops and so forth in there. Now, did they start pulling men out of your units to send them to Vietnam, or how did that affect?
Yes, we were beginning to get smaller and smaller. And I was a little distracted. I had met the woman I was going to marry, and I don't know that I was paying as much attention as I should have been to that. But we were married, and I was part of that drawdown in 1966.
Mm-hmm.
My wife and I were married in April, expecting to be there for a year more. She was an English teacher,
mm-hmm.
American. And I got my tour cut short by April, May, June, July. In June, I got orders to the United States, which was not expected at all. And I was assigned to Aberdeen Proving Ground, and I was one of the original officers signed into the OCS brigade there, because we were going to teach OCS, Officer Candidate School,
mm-hmm.
which they had never had before at Aberdeen.
All right. Now, was that specifically going to be for ordnance and weapons, or?
That was to train ordnance officers,
okay.
to be maintenance guys, maintenance and supply guys.
Okay. Now,
see, I had finished my armor tour,
mm-hmm.
and I spent about 8 months as a shop officer for the 531st was ordnance. I'm not sure I'm giving you the right unit.
Okay. But was that in Germany still?
Still in Germany.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So you actually had some ordnance experience before they send you to Aberdeen.
Yeah.
Okay.
531st Ordnance Company. Then it was transformed into a maintenance
mm-hmm.
company.
And what effectively is the difference between the two?
Ordnance took care of tanks, trucks, and maintenance companies take care of communications, tanks, trucks, generators, weapons.
Mm-hmm.
Weapons were ordnance too.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like there's some overlap there.
Yeah.
But
It
between
was just a restructuring of the Army. They were trying to get units that could go behind the combat force and support all of their stuff without the combat force having to deal with 3 commanders.
Okay. So you're combining functions that had been assigned to separate units.
Together.
Okay. All right. And then what kind of work did you actually have to do then at Aberdeen once you're there? What's your job?
I was a teacher. I taught shop operations and maintenance record keeping. And I did that for 2 years. Then I went to the Ordnance Center in school for the career course, which is typical. Now, I'm a pretty old captain by now, by Vietnam era standards.
Right.
I've been a captain since 1960. I can't remember. I wasn't a captain when I came home. I got a captain when so it'd be June of 66 or 7. I became a captain.
Mm-hmm.
I became a captain. And I was a captain for 3 years or 4 years before I went to Vietnam.
Right.
And most captains, when I got to Vietnam, were 2-year captains.
Right. Because you had a lot, and certainly the ones that were in the combat arms, they moved up pretty quickly to captain, at least if they were out in Vietnam.
Everybody's time was shrinking.
Yeah. Okay. Now, along the way here, now, when you went into, you took your original commission, were you planning on a career in the service at that point, or did that just kind of happen to you?
Absolutely not. I intended to get out. I met my wife. We got married. I got jammed into leaving Germany sooner than I thought we would and going to Aberdeen. By the time I got out of Aberdeen, there wasn't anything looking like a job that I wanted to do, and I was getting so I wanted to go to Vietnam because I thought I ought to do it. And then I went to the Ordnance Center in school. They gave me the career course. And there I learned I was in the bottom third of all ordnance officers, which was a delightful piece of news.
Now, how was that determined?
The Ordnance Corps guys who keep records. I mean, I had some remarks in my efficiency reports like, this officer responds fairly well to counseling.
Oh.
I was a little bit of a maverick. I was most of my career. I would eventually work that into being a change agent for the Army. But
Now, did you have friction or trouble with any of your commanders when you were in Germany, or?
no, it's just I think it's a personality thing. I think it's my problem, not theirs. The Army, as you know, is very honest in its ratings of people. I mean, by and large, it's honest because you're rated by so many people over a career lifetime that you get a pretty good picture of what this officer is like. And I just wasn't a pleaser of. It wasn't that I didn't do things and get things done. It wasn't that. It just I didn't make it easy. And, so when I went to Vietnam, I wanted to be a commander.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a senior captain. I'm in the bottom third of the Ordnance Corps. I need to show them I can do something. And I did.
Okay. So when did they actually send you to Vietnam?
They sent me to Vietnam after I graduated from the career course, which was the fall of 1968. And just before I left, I found out my wife was pregnant. Like 2 days before I left. And I got to tell you, getting on that airplane to say goodbye to her was the hardest thing, one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life.
All right. Now, how did they actually get you out to Vietnam?
They flew me to California, and then at Travis, I went up to Travis, and I got a commercial flight. It was TWA, I think, all the way into Vietnam.
Okay. This is one of these things, the military charters, so it's sort of all military on board?
All military on board, going to Vietnam.
Now, you're a captain. Did you get to sit in first class?
No. I'm about 10 rows back. So a lot of rank going in there, I guess.
Okay. And do you remember stopping any place along the way?
We stopped in Hawaii and we stopped in Okinawa. I think we got out in Okinawa. I can't remember why now. They kept feeding us all the time. I remember that. They were trying to shift your timing
Right.
to Vietnamese timing.
Right. And where did you land in Vietnam?
Benoit.
Okay. And was it day or night when you got there?
It was day, and we taxied up to like sheds. Opened the door, and all I heard was clapping and yelling and shouting. At first I thought we were being welcomed to Vietnam, but the truth of the matter is the Freedom Bird, the plane we were on, was about to take some people home, and they were cheering for that. And then we got into one of those little sheds like they were in, our flights, and then we went from there by bus to the 90th Replacement Battalion.
Okay. Now, what was your first physical impression of Vietnam?
Hot. Hot and sticky. Red dirt. Those are the things that stand out.
Before you went there, did they give you any kind of orientation or information or tell you what to expect?
If they did, Jim, I can't remember it.
Okay. They just
So
put
it
you...
wasn't too much.
Right. Okay. And then you get to the replacement battalion, they figure out... So did you not have orders to a particular unit yet?
No, I have orders to Vietnam.
Okay.
And I show up in the replacement battalion and I think, where am I going now? And they just tell you wait, and I wait, and I get orders to go to the 29th General Support Group, which is a big organization, does a lot of logistic support around Vietnam, and they're located at Long Binh. And I don't know, still don't know what I'm doing. I get up there and I spend the night and I talk to some guys on the staff, and finally found some guys who know something about what I do, which is logistics. Go in to get interviewed. He's the deputy commander, Lieutenant Colonel. Neefus is his name. He interviews me and I tell him I want to be a commander. He doesn't say I won't be. He just doesn't exactly encourage me. And I'm pretty adamant about it. Told him I'm an older captain. I gotta do something. I get the command. Well, the next day I learned I got the command. And I'm loaded in a Jeep with a guy named Major Simpson and Sergeant Major McCoy. And I'm sitting in the back. They got flak vests and weapons. I got me, my duffel bag, and we're headed down to Bearcat. And I learn on the way that I'm going to take command of the 590th Maintenance Company, which I know nothing about. And I'm kind of kept in Major Simpson's hooch for about a day because he's trying to get this thing worked out to how we do this change of command. Because as it turned out, I didn't know it at the time, but the commander was being relieved.
Okay. He wasn't finishing his regular tour.
He
He's
was
moving
not
in.
finishing his regular tour. He was being pulled from command. And Simpson told me why. He explained why the company wasn't performing. And I thought, boy, what luck have I got? But I was very fortunate. The problem was at the top. It was not in the...
All right. Now, describe the Bearcat base. First of all, kind of what was it, where was it?
Well, it was about 15 clicks south of Long Binh, down a paved road, not sort of 2 lanes, with guardhouses.
Okay. And this is sort of east of east of Saigon?
It's sort of east-southeast of Saigon a little
okay.
bit, yeah. It's north of Vung Tau, but quite a bit north of Vung Tau.
Yeah. Well, Vung Tau's on the coast, though, and
yeah,
you're not.
I'm inland.
Okay.
Yeah. And Bearcat is a base the 9th Infantry Division was at for a long period of time. They were moved down to the Delta just before I arrived. Some of the warehouses still had their stuff in it. And the Thais, the Thailand troops were coming in. There's a new division coming in called the Panthers. They were replacing an outfit called the Queen's Cobras, which was a specialized Thai unit and was very highly respected. The Panthers were more regular division, but they were respected also. Bearcat was about a mile long, maybe 3/4 of a mile wide, something like that. I don't know how many troops were there, probably 3,000. A lot of troops, a lot of helicopter units. Longtown North was right near it. That was an air base. A lot of helicopters there. Not a real hot spot in the Vietnam War, certainly not. We got harassed by enemy fire more than we got hurt by it. But the roads were not ours at night, and the fire bases certainly would get attacked a lot. The base camp at Bearcat, not a lot. They'd fire rockets and mortars. And once they tried to get some guys through the wire. I think they did. They were successful. But nothing big. Nothing like Quezon. Or,
Yeah, or even a really large-scale overrun with a lot of sappers. But
well, no, not Bearcat. Now, one of the fire bases I supported up near Swanlock did get overrun. They were firing their 105 howitzers point blank.
So direct fire. Yeah.
And they still got overrun. So I saw some of that. And I saw things because the things get blown up in the jungles. I mean,
All right, let's get you back here. You've arrived. You get sent out to your unit. And what's your introduction to your unit like?
Formal. The troops are formed up. The first time I see the company, the troops are formed up at the company street. The departing commander is addressing them. So you talk about this guy of mine who's my boss timing it right. I pull up. They go out. He grabs the guidon. He hands me the guidon. I say, "I'm your new commander." No, he said some words first, and then I just said, "I look forward to working with you."
Oops, you gotta clip that back on.
I became the new commander.
You're upside down, I think.
I understand the mic got loose, sir.
Okay.
I get it. I
All
got
right.
it.
So you announce you're the new commander. Do you say anything else to them, or do you just leave it at that?
I didn't say anything else to them. I said, "I'm the new commander." They obviously knew that. And I said I would get to know them over the coming days and weeks.
Okay. Now, did you have a strategy or an approach to getting oriented, or did you just...
Yeah. Listen, I called in the NCOs and the officers. I listened to them together, and I went and listened to the NCOs, and I went and listened to the officers. And then I started running my company.
Okay. And what did you learn from them?
They thought they were doing okay in their particular areas. They weren't sure the company was working well together. The reality was, and I had been told by my boss, the supply system was completely broken. Just wasn't functioning. And that was true. They had 32, they shipped parts in multi-packs. They had 32 multi-packs they'd never opened of repair parts that had been ordered for troops that needed them, that were sitting there in the ground. And that was part of the reason that they got in trouble, was because you can't fix something that's broken without the supplies to fix it. You need the bodies and you need the supplies. They had the bodies, they didn't have the supplies. And so I went to work in tech supply. Literally, I mean, that's what I did. As a company commander, I went down and started unpacking multi-packs and watching them process the parts and following the parts through the network and all that. And we got the multi-packs all unpacked, I think, within I can't remember, but it was a fairly short period of time. And I relieved the supply officer. I relieved the supply sergeant. I didn't punish them. I just put them in another kind of job.
But did you have other people that you thought could do it better, or?
I had people who were willing to learn, and there's the difference. The other folks were fighting the problem. Everything was too hard. It's too hard to do this, too hard to do that. The NCR 500 supply support system was terrible, but it was the best the Army had.
Now, was that a computerized system?
Yes, it was the first. It was really a card system.
Right.
It was the first attempt to automate the supply operations at company level. So I ran the company for 6 months.
Okay. And what particular events or incidents kind of stand out in your memory from that stint?
Well, getting shot at, that'll always get your attention. I had a situation, I was very fortunate. Our troops were very fortunate. God was with us, I guess. The guys all would watch movies when we could get them. And we had a little movie theater, just benches and a screen. And this night in February of '69 must be, I think February 23, 1969. The guys were watching a movie. I don't know what it was. I wasn't watching it with them. Got over about, I think around 10 o'clock at night. The guys went back to the hooches, which are sandbagged, and for sleep. And about 20 minutes after they left the movie theater, the VC dropped a number of rockets onto Bearcat, and one of them lands right in the middle of where those guys were sitting. And not one person got hurt by that round.
Is that the one you've got pictures of?
That's the one I have pictures of,
right.
yeah.
Okay.
Most of them you don't get pieces of. And we spent a couple weeks there where we were feeding in small groups of 5. We wouldn't let the whole company get in the mess hall. We wouldn't, a lot of things done to careful. The LSA had a Jeep with 4 guys in it. That the rocket landed right in the middle of the Jeep, killed all 4 of them. That makes you kind of nervous.
Mm-hmm. All right. Now, you said that there was sort of one sapper attack on your base while you were there.
There was one. We got hit at the berm, or fussed with at the berm
right.
from time to time, and kind of regular going on. Getting shot at only once or twice in the whole year I was there. Had a strange story. The guy I taught for, OCS, the guy I worked for in OCS, Major Ralph White, went to Vietnam before I did because I went to the advanced course and all that. Ralph was killed in Vietnam. I didn't know much about it, but I knew he was killed in Vietnam. When I got to the 590th Maintenance Company and I took over the unit property book, the signature just before Ralph died was in the property book with the date. And he had come down that day that he got killed to audit the unit property books of all the units that belonged under his battalion at Bearcat. And it took him longer than it should have. And he left at night, or near night, maybe 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock at night. And they killed him.
Okay. So there are VC or somebody out there along the roads at night that...
Yeah. Isn't that strange, though? What's the chance of my getting assigned to the company with the commander who's being relieved with the name of the... Anyway.
Mm-hmm. All right. Now, would you go off the base for different reasons?
Oh, yeah, all the time.
Where'd you go? What kinds of things were you doing?
Well, I went to Long Bend to coordinate with the group and that kind of thing. I went to fire bases frequently. Those would fly to most of the time. We went to Saigon rarely. My guys went to Vung Tau. I didn't go down to Vung Tau. I did go once, but I flew when I went.
Was Vung Tau, would that be sort of in-country R&R?
Yeah, that's what it was, yeah. And they would take trucks down to Vung Tau. But most of my life was between Long Binh and Van Wan. Later on, after I was through with the company, I'd go out to Black Horse and Swan Lock both on the ground and in the air.
All right. Now, when you would go out to the fire bases in those first 6 months, what were you doing?
Checking up on the maintenance of their equipment, their guns. We supported their guns. We supported their trucks. We supported their radios. We supported their rifles. So I would go out as the support commander and see how things are going.
Okay. Now, was that normal for the commander of a support unit to kind of go out in the field and check up?
I don't know. It's what I did.
Okay.
I don't know. I think you have to see on the ground what's going on. You can't send a guy out to retrieve a vehicle from a jungle until you're out there by yourself and you know you're all alone and there ain't anybody going to help you. If you run into the wrong guy, your wrecker going to get blown up and you're not going to get out of there.
So the wreckers would go out by themselves to go pick things up, or?
Yeah. We'd send a Jeep with 2 guys and a couple of machine guns or something with them. But, essentially they're out there by themselves.
Okay. And when you sent those little details out there to do that, did they run into trouble?
I never had one.
Okay.
Now, a lot of times the ties would go out around us.
Mm-hmm.
But that didn't mean they got everybody between where they were and you were.
Right. Yeah. Now, how much did you actually work or coordinate with the Thai troops who were on the base?
I probably met with the Thais once a week. I would go to their shops because I was interested in how their support was going internally. And it was not all that good. Not because they were not good maintainers, but because they had to do everything with American stuff. And it was problematical. Language gives difficulties. Tools are different.
So whatever manuals or instructions or information they had was in English?
Yes.
Okay.
Now, they would translate it, but I don't know how well that worked.
Probably like the translations you sometimes get with things that are made in China or somewhere.
Yeah, I don't have no idea.
Yeah.
The biggest thing they had trouble with, the 2 things I noticed they had trouble with was electronics. They had difficulty maintaining the electronics. They had difficulty maintaining the howitzers. I don't know the howitzers just because I think they weren't that familiar with the mortars. They seem to do okay with.
But they may not have had as much training on heavy weapons, or
Probably not.
Not as much access to them
Probably
as
not.
Americans would.
I was a backup support for them. They did their own direct support, and I was backup support.
And what impression did you have of them as soldiers?
The Queen's Cobras, who were leaving when I arrived, or maybe they had just left, I'm not sure. But they were very highly regarded. I never heard anybody say anything bad about them. The Panther Division, which was the one that was there most of the time I was there, both as a commander and as a staff officer, the Black Panthers were thought of as fierce fighters, but maybe a little maneuvererish, meaning they didn't welcome the fight. They didn't go get them like the Cobras did.
Mm-hmm.
It was more wait and come towards me. But they fought well when they got in a battle. They were.
And was their job essentially to just kind of limit or control enemy activity in the area, or find the enemy?
Yeah, they were supposed to keep the area free of enemy activity, which is difficult to do in a jungle. And between us and Black Horse, there's a lot of jungle. Between Bearcat and Black Horse.
And where was Black Horse relative to Bearcat?
Black Horse was east. I'm getting the Asian map. I got thinking backwards. East of Bearcat, about 25 clicks, maybe, maybe 30 clicks.
Okay, but the terrain is it all jungle, or are there rice paddies or fields?
Very few rice paddies, lots of jungle.
Okay.
And B-52s would run up and down there because they'd run supplies up and down through the jungles. And they make the earth shake when they came by. You knew it.
All right. And when you went into Saigon, which you did a couple of times, what were you doing that for?
I went in to call my wife. I got to speak to her twice the whole time I was in Vietnam. And
So why would you have to go to Saigon to do that?
no telephone. Had to go get a telephone. I could call in country,
Mm-hmm.
but I couldn't call out of country.
Okay.
And I also went in there to shop for parts because they had all this backlog of parts. And the rule was, you find it, you keep it. Finders, keepers. So I would go down there, and my sergeants, senior sergeants would go down there, and my warrants would go down there on occasion, and we would go shopping. I was very fortunate. I shopped 13 Dodge power truck engines out of there, and that was like a piece of gold in Vietnam. You couldn't find them. The old 3/4 ton.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll never forget, General Heiser, First Log Command Commander, came down to tour my company while I was a company commander. And he saw 13 engines out there. He assumed they were all unserviceable. He said, "Captain, you've been sitting on these bad engines. You're no good at doing your Ordnance Corps job. I want those in Long Bin tomorrow morning." We changed 13 truck engines that night.
So you put the good new engines in and gave them the old ones?
Yep. It was, Vietnam was different.
Okay. Now, when you got these engines, I mean, were you buying them from Vietnamese?
No. The American ships in Saigon would offload all this
Right.
stuff in these huge depots.
Okay.
And if you could find something you needed, you could get it. If you were a U.S. unit.
Okay.
So you go in, because nothing was cataloged, nothing was in a storage space where it ought to be. They didn't know where the stuff was.
Now, would stuff like that wind up on the black market?
I'm sure it did. I wasn't running one of those places.
Okay. So what you were going shopping, you were going down to the docks. You weren't going and finding it from some guy on a street corner who had something that had gone off the back of a truck.
Or a depot off the docks
Mm-hmm.
where they'd moved it because
Right.
they had to get room. And
What other kinds of things would you scrounge? And you've got the engines. What else did you pick up?
well, steaks were scrounged. Vehicles were scrounged. I would know that because the vehicles would come into me for repair, and I'd know that the serial number wasn't one that should have been in that unit or something like that. I think really you could buy anything in Vietnam.
What, didn't you have a building that you weren't supposed to have? You had a picture of some building and you said you got that from somewhere?
I'm not with you.
Okay. Well, in your albums or whatever, you had at some point there was a photograph of some building that you said you got from somewhere.
Yes. That was a troop building. Well, it wasn't a troop building. It was designed to be an office. We scrounged that. That was a butler hut, I think is what they call them. All aluminum.
Mm-hmm.
And my first sergeant scrounged that. I don't know I don't know where he did it.
All right. Now, was the first sergeant pretty experienced when you got there, or?
Yes.
Okay.
He was a wonderful man, Lou Ellis. He kept me straight in a lot of ways, and he let me take my chances too. Our mess hall was the first time I walked in the mess hall kitchen, I was absolutely astounded. I mean, there was grease on the pans, and these Vietnamese women were supposedly keeping it clean. And I just shuddered. I mean, I called the mess sergeant in, and he and I had a to-do, and I told him to fix it. He said, "I can't. I've tried to fix it." So I said, "Okay, I'm going to fire him." So I did. And I put troops in there. And the first sergeant was very helpful to me to make that happen, and make it work. But the troops, once they saw how bad it was, the first sergeant took them a number of them, and walked them through the kitchen. Said, "This is what you're eating, boys." I had a colonel from Long Binh call me and say, "You can't fire those girls." I said, "Well, they're not coming back in there to work, so you can do what you want to do, I guess." I probably was more polite than that. But nothing came of it. I mean, I fired them, and that was that. And the mess hall cleaned up. And I gave the mess sergeant a Bronze Star for his good work as a mess sergeant.
Did you ever bring the Vietnamese back into work there again, or did you just keep your own soldiers?
Not in the kitchen. No way.
All right. Yeah. How many sort of Vietnamese civilians and things were working on Bearcat, do you think, or how common were they?
A lot of them. There were a lot of them. I'll bet you every unit had 5 or 6 Vietnamese people working for them.
And what jobs would they do?
They clean mostly. Clean living areas, clean latrines, clean mess halls, clean whatever. That's mostly what they did. I had one boy I kept in my company. He lived in Longtown. His parents had been killed. He stayed within my company about 3 months. That was illegal. I'm not supposed to do that. But I didn't tell anybody. He was a good kid. I wonder what happened to him.
Right. Did you have concerns that the Vietnamese civilians might be VC, or?
Yeah, some of them. I mean, of course you had concerns, but gee, the ones that I had around me weren't. I mean, I never was antsy about them.
Mm-hmm.
I think usually when someone's doing something other than what they would normally do, you get to find out about it.
Because I have talked to a number of people who actually spotted people doing things like pacing off compounds.
Oh yeah, something like that. Yeah, I'm sure that happens, and I'm sure it happened on Bearcat.
Mm-hmm. How did the soldiers treat the Vietnamese?
My soldiers, as far as I know, treated them sort of like, "You're okay as long as you do it my way." I guess that'd be the best I can describe. That's what comes to my mind is, "You're okay, just be sure you do what I tell you to do, when I tell you to do it, the way I tell you to
Mm-hmm.
do it." So that would be directive, I guess would be the word I'd look for. You asked me a question I hadn't really thought about.
Yeah. Well, part of it is that you get, and this may affect more combat units and things, but at times some of the soldiers were trained to view all of the Vietnamese as the enemy or things like this,
yeah,
or
I don't
and a lot of stuff about mistreating civilians and this kind of thing. That one hears in different places, but I just kind of is that.
I think on Bearcat there wasn't a lot of that kind of stuff going on. It was more structured.
Right.
We weren't a combat unit.
Right.
Well, we were combat units, but we weren't out in the jungle.
Yeah, you're not being shot at by people all the time. You don't have to worry necessarily about will they shoot you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, was there a village, or Longtown was nearby? Was that a Vietnamese town?
Vietnamese town.
Yeah. And would the soldiers from the base go over there, or?
No, they go to Horace Corner. There was a place where the road joined Route 15 coming in off of Bearcat, and you'd find little lassies out there waving at guys, and they would go out and visit with them.
Right. Now, did you have much by way of discipline problems or things while you were company commander?
No, I had my biggest problem. I think that one of the biggest problems we had was the certified nuts in our own units who would go nuts. I mean, we had some grenades thrown into a enlisted club on the base. I had a guy in my company who got up on drugs or something and came charging up to the officers' area to try and wipe out some officers. But he was out of his mind. I mean, you know, my observation about, I'm sure he was drugged.
Mm-hmm.
My observation about drugs was, if the soldier was pretty stable, he could stand the drugs pretty well. But if he was a little unstable and he got a touch of them, watch out.
Okay. Now, was it sort of opium or things like that was the issue?
I think that it was both opium and a lot of marijuana.
Mm-hmm.
I think.
Yeah, marijuana was pretty common. I mean, now, how much of that would you actually observe yourself or have to deal with?
Well, I saw the results. I had to deal with the results. I mean, I had one kid who I didn't discipline in the way I could have. I did discipline him, but not in the way I could have, for drug use, who he just couldn't quit. He just couldn't quit. And I had some soldiers do some very strange things to try and go home. Usually they were on drugs too. But they'd do things like, I had one soldier took off his clothes and walked out near the wire. He's wandering around out there. He wanted me to send him home. I told him I'd never send him home. And he came around. He did better. But I have had other ones that did not. Drugs was not a huge problem.
Mm-hmm.
If it was, I was naive.
Mm-hmm. Well, heroin hadn't really hit while you were there.
I think that's probably right. The
that
heroin
comes a little
trade
later.
was not full bore, and we weren't near a big city.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, really, it was farmland around where we were.
Right. Okay. What were race relations like in the unit?
Well, I had a black first sergeant, I had a black maintenance platoon leader, and I had numerous black soldiers, and I don't know of anything that ever happened
Mm-hmm.
in that regard in our company.
Yeah. I mean, would the soldiers sort of self-segregate when off duty, or would they mix together pretty
No,
much?
they mix. You look at some of the pictures I got,
Yeah.
you'll see that.
Yeah, I did notice that in the pictures.
Yeah.
And I expect, I mean, you have a certain number of blacks who go into the military to advance, have careers and advance them, and they get into upper ranks of sergeants. They'll pick assignments like that where they're not getting shot at. But if they're career guys and they're in charge, you maybe don't have some of the same tensions.
Yeah, I think if a commander and his NCOs and officers don't play the game, the soldiers don't play the
Mm-hmm.
game.
Okay. Now you have the assignment commanding the company for 6 months, and then
Yeah.
what do they do with you? You have a full year tour there. What do you do in the second 6 months?
Second 6 months, I moved to staff because command is rare, and there's only a certain number, and they don't let you command too long.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to stay in command. Went to staff at the Bearcat LSA, which was also on Bearcat. I thought I was going to go to 29th Support Group, but the new commander at the LSA, Colonel Carter, had that canceled, and I was to stay at Bearcat. So I had a staff responsibility for the maintenance and supply operation that I had been commanding one part of. And I had now the unit at Black Horse. I can't remember, 541st, or I can't get it right now. They were like a comparable to me, but doing something for the Black Horse. What is the Black Horse? I should know. You know, Jim? Unit.
There was a, I think, an armored cavalry unit.
Yeah, it's an armored cavalry unit, but I don't know what, I can't get the name of it.
Well, that can get looked. I think I have a book about them at home.
We can find it.
Yeah.
It's knowable. They were providing the same support for the armored cav type of support that I was providing out of Bearcat for ties and the other U.S. units on Bearcat.
Mm-hmm.
And in that job, I was paper pusher, mostly. I'd go out and visit as much as I could, because I like to manage by wandering around, and I go out to do that. And I didn't like it very much. I had to be careful with the commander of the 590th. I had to be careful about going into the shops there and talking to people. I think if I learned anything about that, I learned to just take the commander and put him somewhere else. where he doesn't know anybody. Because when you put that burden on me, I didn't respond real well to it. I did a good job, I think, for him. I don't mean,
What kind of relationship did you have with your own CO?
with my who?
Your commander?
Okay. Again, he wasn't there when I was the commander of the company, by
Right.
and large, so. He was a pretty senior lieutenant colonel, and he had his own ideas about how he wanted to do things. And he was not a great listener. He wasn't a bad guy. I don't mean that. I mean, I worked for a lot of other officers who are not great listeners. I'm one of them that's not a great listener. And but he and I didn't have a strained relationship, but it wasn't as close as it was with Major Simpson, certainly.
Okay. All right. Now, over the course of the year that you spent in Vietnam, did you have a sense of sort of how the war was going, or if we were making any progress, or?
Well, I didn't think about it. To tell you the truth, I don't think I thought about. I mean, we always thought we were winning. I always thought we were winning. I told my wife we won the war. Well, that's debatable. What does winning mean?
Mm-hmm.
And we were doing better under Abe Abrams than we were under Westmoreland. There's no question about that. But I don't know. I mean, it was very sad for me when Saigon fell so quickly.
I guess one measure might be, I mean, you talked about, the roads being dangerous at night and things like that, or bases getting attacked. I mean,
Yeah.
was there any change in sort of the regularity with which that kind of thing would happen, or?
Over the time I was there, I don't think so.
Okay.
Where I was.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that doesn't mean it wasn't going on somewhere else, but where I was. And I said we thought we were winning.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't cross my mind I was in any kind of problem. In fact, I expected to come home to a pretty normal home life. Forget about it.
Mm-hmm. All right. Now, are there other particular incidents or things about that tour in Vietnam that stand out in your mind before we move you out of there?
Yeah, one thing I'd like to mention. I used to go up to Black Horse. They had an extra mission of graves registration,
Mm-hmm.
where they take their bodies off the battlefield, the first stop. And I was really impressed with the dignity with which they handled the casualties and the care they took of them. And I think of the medical care. I mean, guys would fly in, be flown into the helicopter unit right near where my company was. And I would go over there from time to time when I had a lot of soldiers on the ground, triaging them, the doctors, and they were so kind and so good. That meant something to me.
Mm-hmm. All right. Now you get to the end of your year's tour. Now you go home. So to take us on the trip home and what happens after that.
Well, we play the hooray game with the Freedom Bird at Benoit. We go through the 90th replacement first, and I took a warm shower up there, and I trashed all of my clothes and put on my uniform I wore into country and went to Benoit and cheered when the Freedom Bird came in and got on that plane and headed home.
How much? You called your wife twice, but did you get regular letters or?
Yeah, she and I wrote every day almost.
Okay.
And we threw most of them out. We got a few of them left, but not many.
All right.
I got on a plane and we flew to Alaska, going back. And we were really nicely greeted in Alaska by some elderly women who had cookies and cakes, and we expected that when we got to the United States. Got to Travis, got on the bus to go to San Francisco, and the guy in charge, sergeant officer, whoever it was, said, "Now you be careful wearing your uniform on an airplane." And I know I wasn't the only one who said, "What the hell are you talking about? I just came out of a war zone. I'm proud of what I did. I did it for you. And I can't wear a plane or my uniform on an airplane? you gotta be me. But that's the way it was. And I put on my uniform and flew. I said, to hell with it. I'm not going to do it.
And did you run into anything interesting?
No, I didn't have that problem one. But I was going to Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't land except, San Francisco, I only had the getting out business.
Right.
I didn't get harassed. And I got home and met my wife, and we moved on.
All right. And what was your next assignment?
My next assignment was to a place called the Ammunition Procurement and Supply Agency in Joliet, Illinois. I was going to be a procurement officer, so I went to Fort Lee, met my son for the first time. He's 5 months old. My wife and I take off and go to Fort Lee, Virginia. I go to procurement school. It's 2 months, 3 months, something like that. And then I go out to Joliet. Now, I think I'm going to be a procurement officer, but the general makes me the secretary of the general staff.
Okay, and what does that mean?
That means I'm the #1 administrative assistant for the commanding general of the Ammunition Procurement and Supply Agency.
So you're a major league paper shuffler?
I'm a major league paper shuffler. I get to be a major now.
Mm-hmm.
And I shuffle the paper for 2 years, and then I'm put in foreign military sales ammunition business for about 8 months. And then I get a really tough assignment to Hawaii as a materiel officer for the 725th Maintenance Battalion. But I arrive, and Colonel Peterson says, you were in this Secretary of General Staff, so you're going to come and be my adjutant.
Oh.
So I become the DISCOM adjutant. Another paper shuffling job. After a year and a half of that, they'd let me go down to the materiel officer, which is it's the senior logistics operations officer in a maintenance battalion. And I served there till the end. And there I got to be the guy who loaded all the stuff out of Hawaii to go to Guam for the fall of Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
We provided most of the kitchens. A lot of the vehicles came out of 25th Infantry Division. We marshaled it on the parade field and drove it down to the airport, and they put it on C-5s and flew it to Guam, and we set up the camp in Guam.
Mm-hmm.
I never went to Guam personally. My people went.
Okay. And so that's where you were when Saigon fell, or was
That's
this?
where I was when Saigon fell.
All right. Now, had you been following the course of the Vietnam War after you got back?
Yes. Yes, and I was discouraged. But you can't pull people out like that. You can't just pull them out. Iraq's another example. I mean, they're doing the same thing one more time, I think. Now, if we'd stayed in there with a little while with Iraq, I think we were closer on Iraq than we were on Vietnam, and I think if we'd stayed a little longer, we might have pulled that one off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I think at some point the Iraqi government was suggesting that, gee, maybe we could come back.
Yeah, everybody got too antsy on that one. We should have stayed out of Afghanistan and kept the pressure on in Iraq, and I think Iraq would have made it.
Yeah. Although Iraq was the one that we went into after Afghanistan and with less reason. So it's
yeah, I understand.
But Vietnam, you look at that, that's sort of hard to figure out what would have happened. And ultimately, I think when you were there as a soldier, you had a job to do when you went and did it.
That's what soldiers do.
Yeah. And the rest of it, who knows? Okay. Now, so at this point, were you kind of committed now to you were a career military guy at this point?
Absolutely.
Okay. And did you enjoy the time in Hawaii? Was that a good place to be?
I enjoyed being a materiel officer very much.
Okay.
The paperwork's okay. I can do it.
Now, you made a comment earlier about how you tried to kind of improve the way the Army did things in different places. Were you able to do any of that, either in Joliet or in Hawaii?
Most of it, the big stuff took place after that.
Okay.
Most of it took place after that.
Okay, so where did you go after Hawaii?
After Hawaii, I went to the Command and General Staff College. and I graduated about number 5 in my class.
Okay. So you're doing better now in terms of
Oh
your
yeah,
ranks than in the old days.
now things are looking up. Now when I talk to the ordnance guys, they say, "You're doing great, Craig. Just hang on, keep doing what you're doing." Because I did get a Bronze Star for achievement in Vietnam for what I accomplished in the company, and I was doing well. I was on the right track. Graduated from Leavenworth, went to Babson, which is a business school where ordnance officers often are sent because it's a very entrepreneurial school.
It's in Boston, right?
It's outside of Boston, Massachusetts. Spent 18 months at Babson. Went to Tank Automotive Command to work in supply. But I reported in, and the general was General Hal Hardin, who was a Babson grad. He said, "Craig, you are not going to go into supply. You are going to go build tanks." I said, "Yes, sir." So I went down to the PM tanks at the Tank Automotive Command in Detroit, and I took over the program manager of the M48A5 tank rebuild program. This is taking old M48 tanks at Anniston Depot and restuffing them with new gun, new fire control, new engine. Essentially a new tank.
Now the M48 was a pretty old design, wasn't it? I mean, that
Yeah,
went
it
back.
was a cast hull, last of the cast hull tanks, and the Israelis had figured out that you could put a 105 gun in them. And then we started making them. And I closed out that program. I didn't start it. Don Kenny was the program manager when it began. I took it about the middle, and I took it till the last one was produced. And then I was made the Tank Automotive Command, what the heck was the title of that job? Integrated Logistics Support. So I was the guy who worked with the program managers to make sure they got their logistics coming on at the same time as their weapon system came on, or their truck, or their whatever they were building. And I did that for a couple of years, I guess. So I'm like 4 or 5 years now at Take-Off. And then they call me from the Ordnance Corps and say, "Craig, you got to go overseas. We're going to send you to Korea for a year." I said, "I don't want to be separate from my wife." I convinced them that I could go for 2 years, because wives could accompany you 2 years. So I went to Korea, went to Daegu, and worked out of camp north of there. I can't think of the name of it right now.
Yeah, but Daegu is a fairly important city in South Korea, right? I mean,
Daegu is a big city,
yeah,
right in the middle. South of Seoul, north of Busan.
Yep.
I was in charge of the general support maintenance for all of Korea. Ran the shop, 700 Koreans working for me. And this is where I began to make change. I put in a completely new computer system that saved, I think they thought, several $1 million in 2 years after I left. It took about 2 years to put the system in place.
Now, what years was this that you were there?
This is early 80s, 81, 82. It took a couple of years to redesign it and get it programmed and get it working in the shops. And I saved a lot of money for the government by, when I got there, they were taking apart every engine that came in the door. And I was wandering around. And I wandered in the shop, and I'd say, why are you doing that? Well, I found out that the guys had a job, the Koreans had a job description, and the job description said you take apart engines. And guess what they were doing? I changed their job description, and we put in their job was to save engines. And the number of engines being taken apart was cut in half about. Something as simple as that. They thought they were doing what they were supposed to do, wanted to do what they were supposed to do. I also think there was some shenanigans going on with the PDO yard. I think they were sending pieces of engines to PDO and they were being reassembled.
What is PDO?
Property disposal.
Okay.
See, if you take apart an engine, it's got to have some bad parts.
Mm-hmm.
You send them off to property disposal. If you got a guy in property disposal who picks up the parts and they aren't so bad, you can rebuild the engine.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there was a lot of that going on too.
Okay. Were you mostly just dealing with Koreans, or did you have American staff?
I had one American in each shop. That's about all. So I had a handful of Americans, mostly Koreans. They're very good workers. They do what they're told.
Now, what was life like in Korea?
Different. You can't associate. It's like you can't associate your alphabet with their script, and so unlike Europe, where you can kind of guess this is a grocery store.
Right.
You can't kind of guess in Korea what it is, and they do so much selling by market, and they trade. They barter all the time. And Korea is a country of distinct differences. I mean, I saw straw huts with TV antennas on top of them out in the country. And the roads, they have the road between Daegu and Seoul has like 2 airfields built into the road. It's different. Up on the border, it's different too. You're kind of it's warmer than not warm, but more active
Mm-hmm.
than the German border I was on back in the 60s. Much more active border.
Did you get up to the border much, or?
Yeah, I supported all those troops up there.
Okay.
Go up there all the time.
So you're still doing the thing where you're going around and looking for yourself?
I've always done that. Then I get reassigned out of Korea back to TACOM. But this time I'm on a duty. I'm Inspector General. I'm pulled out of my normal corps and put in as an Inspector General. And I served as Inspector General for 4 years. 3 years, I guess it was, at TACOM. Had the joy of going and doing the Army's investigation on Jack Anderson's allegations that we were building crappy tanks. Did some major investigations at Lima. Allegations that we were building crappy tanks.
And we're rebuilding crappy tanks?
We were not building crappy tanks. There were unions involved. There were personal. I can't tell you.
Right. Okay.
I can tell you generally these things were wrong. They had a shred of truth to them, like most things do, but they didn't hold up under the long haul.
Okay. Now, was this your last assignment before you retired, or did you have?
Then I was assigned from there as Director of Systems Engineering, which is all field engineering support for the Tank Automotive Command.
Okay, and where were you based then?
I was still at TACOM in Detroit.
Okay.
But this time I was given a mission when I went. Craig, you are the new Director of Systems Engineering, but you are to break that outfit in half and make 2 parts out of it, one dealing with technical data, one dealing with engineering support to the field. And you can take the one you want to, after you get it split, you can take the one you want to take. Now, around this time, I get orders, right after the IG, I think it was, I got orders to go to take command at Mainz Army Depot in Germany. And my son, I would have lived off base. He had to take a bus. He's at far distance from everything. He's at an age where I think he can't do that. I called the Army and I said, thank you very much. I'd love to take command. I can't take that one. Oh, that happened just before I went to Korea. That's how I got to Korea. That happened just before I went to Korea. I can't take that one. Then go to Korea, was what it was. So what happened was I got promoted along the way here, from lieutenant colonel to colonel. I never went to the Army War College. I
Mm-hmm.
never was stationed in Washington, D.C. I refused to command.
Mm-hmm.
Could have been worse. I split that directorate. I took the tech data because it was the most unconnected piece. We innovated some new technical data programs, new ways of doing business, joined with ARCOM and doing the technical data work for a system instead of doing it for the gun and doing it for the,
Mm-hmm.
the tracks. And I won a DoD award for best standardization program.
Because that's a period in the 80s when the high-tech stuff was at that time taking off and the personal computers were coming
it was really
in.
beginning to take off,
Yeah.
and we were doing things back in the dark ages.
Yeah. Although some of the early Vietnam-type computers, like for artillery direction, I think were still getting taken into Iraq. So
Probably.
had some of that.
Probably.
All right. Now, that after you do that, basically, do you decide, okay, it's time to retire, or does the Army decide it was time for you to retire?
I decided it was time to retire. I'm 47 years old. The economy is not all that great. I'm limited. I can't do anything in the tank automotive business because of conflict of interest.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to be careful about a couple other areas because of IG responsibilities. So I decide I'm not even going to stay for 26. I'm going to get out as soon as I can get a job.
Mm-hmm.
I tell the general and I start looking for a job. And I keep trying and trying, and I'm not getting anywhere, and then all of a sudden I get a call from a friend of mine who's working for GTE out in Taunton, Massachusetts. And they're fielding the mobile subscriber equipment system, which is tactical radio, battalion level.
Mm-hmm.
First one that operates off the satellite. And they have 5 regional support centers, 1 in Germany, 1 in Korea, and 3 in the United States. They are on contract for direct support maintenance for 15 years. And I'm hired to run their depot and their maintenance operation,
Mm-hmm.
which I did. And then I took over as the program manager for the whole program. Now this is a $37 million a year chunk of change. It's
Mm-hmm.
big business.
So is this paying better than the Army did?
Ironically, I asked for the same salary.
Oh.
Yes, after a while. It got much better. So I got to support, these regional support centers supported active duty units all around so when the Gulf War started and we went in, we then General Dynamics went in with them, the regional support centers.
Mm-hmm.
Well, one regional support center. We took the regional support center at Fort Hood, Texas, since most of the armor units were coming out of Hood, and we just put them into country. And they provided the radio support during that war. It wasn't very long.
Yeah. Did you go out there yourself, or did you just stay back
No,
here?
I stayed back. I was running the program. My job was to handle the bucks and
Mm-hmm.
make the big decisions and keep
Right.
the boss informed and keep the government happy and all that. And I retired from that when I was about 60.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm glad I did because I got Parkinson's. And I found it easier to be retired with Parkinson's than it is to work.
All right. But what kind of stuff do you now do?
I'm a history buff and I collect Civil War. I have collected Civil War since I was a child.
Mm-hmm.
I have Civil War orders. I have letters. I have some photographs. I have some weapons. I love to read about history. I have not been into Vietnam history very much, but I'm very interested in World War II history. I have an uncle who was a prisoner of war in Stalag for 18 months, who I know or knew. He's dead now. Interesting to hear him tell his story. My father served in Europe in World War II, put armor on tanks for the Normandy invasion. He worked for the Tank Automotive Command,
Mm-hmm.
same place I worked.
There you go.
And it was a good career.
Right. Okay. Well, I'd just like to close this out by thanking you for taking the time and sharing the story today.